How you doing, guys? Gonna rip this thing up, a little podcast style here, so let's get it on. Guys, we are reviewing book Jesse Itzler's Living with a Seal. If you're listening on the podcast, thank you very much. If you're on the YouTube channel, at Tommy Tahoe, thank you for that as well. So I just read Living with a Seal by Jesse Itzler. It was recommended to me by a couple different people, Katie Ott in particular. Shout out to Katie Ott. And I've been a big fan of both Itzler and David Goggins for a while now. Maybe I'll just give you a little bit of background and we're going to dive on into the book. So Jesse Itzler is, he's a crazy guy. He is currently the owner of the Atlanta Hawks. Formerly, he co-founded Marquis Jet, which sold to NetJets, which is owned by Warren Buffett. And then he partnered with a few people to create Zyko, the coconut water, which sold to Coca-Cola. And then way before that, he was a rapper. He created the first NBA soundtrack for the New York Knicks. Just a crazy entrepreneur. And he's married to Sarah Blakely, who is the founder of Spanx, and I believe she's the youngest ever American woman billionaire. So they're each, if not both billionaires, both 100 millionaires, and she's definitely a billionaire. So he's a crazy guy. And then in his spare time, he runs ultra marathons. So he runs 50, 70, 100 mile races. So he's just sick like that. He's a crazy guy. And he was someone that, you wouldn't expect that would get in a slump a little bit and wouldn't need to kind of kick things into extra gear. But that's where he found himself. At that point in his life, he said, I need to shift it up a little bit. I'm doing the same thing. I'm getting into the routine. And, I've felt myself in that same place before. Not that I've ever lived with, a Navy SEAL. But so this is where the book kicks off. So he's at this race. He's doing a relay race with a few friends. And it's a 100-mile race in 24 hours. Or, it's 24 hours to see how many times you can run around a track. The goal is 100 miles in 24 hours. And he has 4 other teammates, so they take turns running. And they've got all the gear, they've got all the refreshments and the snacks and all that stuff that you need. When you're running for that long, you need a lot. And Itzler sees this man, this large guy, about 270 pounds, shows up by himself. All he has is a little thing of crackers and a water, and he's by himself. He doesn't smile. He doesn't talk to anyone, and he's just what Itzler sees is that he's just kind of barreling through, and he's really impressed with the effort that it took. What really happened is David Goggins is a former Navy SEAL, and at the time, this is post being a SEAL, he decided that he wanted to raise money for the Wounded Warrior Foundation, right? And he thought, I don't want to do it the normal way. I don't want to just fundraise. I want to do it in a badass way. Like, I want to, what's something that, a physical task that needs to get done, and that people would be impressed with, that people think is intimidating. And so he thought ultra marathons was the way to go. At the time, he was 270 pounds. He was bodybuilding, he was powerlifting, he was just doing heavy deadlifts and squats and benches and all that stuff. He hadn't picked up a pair of running shoes in over a year, no training, just showed up to this race in San Diego, which is crazy. So he shows up, barrels through the first 70 miles in about 12, 13 hours. So he's ahead of pace, he's doing great, and then his body breaks down to the point where he's broken every bone in his foot. He has muscle tears. He has to go sit down, and he literally cannot. There's a bathroom 20 feet away. He literally does not have the energy to stand up and get to the bathroom. So he actually pees blood down his leg. I mean, he is a broken man 70 miles into this race. And people are seeing this and they're like, holy shit, like, you got to get him some help. He says, no, I'm going to keep going. I got to get this 100 miles in, or I can't compete in, further races and keep the funding going. So he gets up and he just, first he walks through, and then he jogs, then he runs, and he finishes. He gets it done in plenty of time. I think he got it done in like 19 or 20 hours. So he had time to go, time to spare, and he gets the 100 miles in. So long story short, in the beginning, Jesse sees this, and he's like, holy shit, I don't know who this guy is, but I need to know him. So he cold calls him. He looks him up, and he cold calls him, and Jesse has this this crazy curiosity, I would say, that he'll just cold call people randomly that he thinks are cool, and he's basically tries to be their friend. And it's cool because that's pretty much what I do with the podcast, with the interviews, is I listen to someone on a podcast, or I read their book, or see them on Instagram, and like, I want to be their friend. I want to talk to them for 45 minutes. I'm going to go disguise it as a podcast and put it out there and try to gain their knowledge and network with them. So he cold calls him, and he flies out to California the next day to meet with him. And he proposes that Goggins lives with him and his family for a month, for 31 days, and he'll pay him and all that stuff. And Goggins agrees under one circumstance, that he will do anything, it's not actually anything he says. Nothing is held back. There's no excuses, nothing. And Itzler says, it's on, let's do it. I don't think he knew exactly what he was getting himself into, but that's how this kicks off. And a good quote from Itzler to kick this off is, most of my successes in life have come from learning how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like I said, I just want to get better. That's all he wants. He does things a lot differently than most people, but that's part of the reason why he's so successful. Dramatic sip of coffee. So, one of the first lesson is that I had was, committing to the decision. If you go back to where Goggins needed to get that race done, he needed to get those 100 miles in. He committed to doing it. He had every reason to back out, and he didn't back out. He went through with it. And so, I guess that is, similar to Itzler. He had, he wanted to back out of this probably on day one, but he kept it going. So, he, day one, Goggins shows up. No suitcase. This is kind of like 2 points here. No suitcase, nothing. It's December in 2010 in New York City, and it's one of the harshest winters of all time in New York City. The city was pretty much shut down. There was like advisory that you shouldn't go outside, you shouldn't drive, you shouldn't do anything. Businesses were closed, and Goggins shows up, and it's 10 degrees out and snowing, and he's just got like shorts and like a t-shirt, and no hat, no gloves, and no suitcase. He's just got like maybe a backpack, and like that's it. So the first day, there's like, what is going on? So the minimalism thing is really cool. That he shows up, and when he leaves, it's like he wasn't even there. Like he's got his little bag. He doesn't require much food. He is making the bed every morning. And like all he cared about, Goggins, was the mission at hand, which in this case was to train Itzler mentally and physically, and then getting his own fitness right. I mean, they're doing like 2 days, 3 days, but Goggins, like, there was one point where they did like a 2 or a 3 a day, and they're done at like 11 at night, and then he goes downstairs to the gym in their apartment building, and he's just on the stationary bike all night from like 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And like Itzler goes down there and just sees like, massive puddle of sweat. It's like, yeah, I've just been biking for 8 hours. Like, okay. So let's get to this. Day one, Goggins shows up, and they're like, we're gonna go for a run outside. 7 a.m., 10 degrees, blizzard, obviously. And Itzler thinks that just because it's cold and it's snowy that like, hey, we're not gonna go outside. Goggins gets him off to an uncomfortable start. And Itzler goes to Goggins and says, hey, do you know it's 14 degrees outside? And Goggins, turns to him. He says, enjoy this shit. If you want to be 70 and sunny, it's 70 and sunny. Just run. The elements are in your mind. I don't ever check the temperature when I run. Who gives a fuck what the temperature on the computer says? The computer isn't out there running, is it? Whoo, yeah. He gets right into it. And, that controlling of the mind is maybe the biggest thing. And that's probably, if everyone has a superpower, if everyone's great at one thing, Goggins is controlling the mind. I mean, he plays through pain, and when he's not working out, it's like his mind is just kind of blank. Like he just puts himself in really tough, interesting places mentally when he's working out that he doesn't feel the pain, or he pushes through the pain, or he's got all these tactics to get around it. So like day one, it's controlling the mind. If you want it to be 70 and sunny, it's 70 and sunny. So that's huge. Another thing that Goggins teaches Itzler and teaches me is the power of not having excuses, right? I mean, their workout schedule's intense, right? I mean, they get up every morning at 5-ish, and they run at least 6 miles. Some days it's 8, some days it's 10, some days they're wearing a 50-pound weight vest. And every night they run at least 3, and sometimes it's 8, and sometimes it's 10, and sometimes there's a weight vest, and sometimes there's hills and all that stuff. And then all throughout the day, they're doing pull-ups and push-ups and sit-ups and squats and all this stuff. But there's no excuses, right? There's one point where Itzler has a really big business meeting, and Goggins follows him to work, and he's just like kind of watches him work during the day. And it's just so interesting. And they have like a 10-minute break or 15-minute break from this big meeting. Itzler's got a suit on, all this stuff. And, Goggins, right when they take a break, Goggins pulls him aside and goes, you got a burpee test. And it's like, I can't do this. Like, this is the biggest meeting of the year for me. And Goggins says, you got to do whatever I say. 100 burpees as fast as you can do it. So Itzler is in his office, strips down to his boxers, and rips 100 burpees as quick as he can. He's just, beating sweat, and, has to go back to the meeting, and he's dripping in sweat, and everyone's like, what is going on? But he did it, no excuses, like, 10, 12 minutes, however long it took him to get those 100 burpees in, like, he just got it done. And you can get, like, that's when you're thinking, hey, I don't have the time to be fit, or I don't have the time to do this side hustle, or I don't have the time to do whatever. That's just an excuse. They found the time to get these workouts in. Like, Itzler didn't stop working. His job as a husband and as a father didn't stop. I mean, he was just adding on all of this extra, exercise type of commitments. So, there's no excuses, and on the moment of the workouts, on the piece around that, like, it was simple. The whole philosophy of Goggins is like, it's simple but not easy, right? Like, he didn't need a bunch of equipment. I think they lifted weights maybe once or twice, but it was like simple, like bench press, do some rows, but for the most part, it was running, it was pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, maybe some dips, and maybe some bike, but like, that's really it. But it would be so much volume of all those things that Itzler's body would break down. It would be 1,000 push-ups in a day. It would be, how many pull-ups can you do in 20 minutes until your arms fall off? Like, doing 10, 12, 15 miles in a day in the snow, or at some points in the Georgia heat when they're down there. And it would be running before your plane in the morning, and then as soon as you land, doing a bunch of push-ups. It was just crazy. And he keeps it simple, and it's like, sometimes I think we overcomplicate fitness, like, oh, I need all this fancy equipment, or I need to go to Barry's boot camp, or whatever this is. Like, you can do it all on your own, and you don't need 3 hours. You need 30 minutes, and you could be beat down if you just do, a bunch of push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, run, sprint, all this stuff. Like, you don't need all the fancy equipment. And so that's something that I might start getting into a little bit more, is like, screw the gym. Like, although that, there's cool stuff going on there too. Like, just take a couple kettlebells, get on a hill in San Francisco, and like let's get after it. So that was cool. And like I said, Goggins would do the workouts with Itzler, but he would 5x or 10x the volume that he was doing. It was just crazy. At one point Itzler's like complaining. He's like, I can't even lift my arms above my head. And then got like from doing, let's say, 500 push-ups, and then Goggins would, spend all night doing 5,000 push-ups, and say, "Fuck your shoulders." It's unreal. So, a few more points. Throughout the book, Itzler, maybe to take a step away from Goggins. Throughout the book, Itzler, he tells stories from his business side and from the past, and just gives you some insight on that, which is really cool. And he tells these stories to Goggins too, because Goggins is somewhat interested in like how have you made all of this money? How are you so successful? All that stuff. And one of my favorite stories is Itzler's media campaign with Foot Locker. So this is back in the day. He's probably in his 20s, maybe his 30s, probably his 20s, and he puts together some like media company with a friend of his, and they're bidding for a radio campaign with Foot Locker, and they win the campaign because Itzler says, we can get Grant Hill, in the campaign easily. Grant Hill that year won the Rookie of the Year in the NBA. He was like the hot shot. He was like the next big thing. It would be, comparable, maybe not comparable to like LeBron, but getting a major superstar, and radio, and Foot Locker was like, yeah, I'm in. But Itzler didn't know Grant Hill. He didn't know anyone that knew Grant Hill. He had no connections. But he told the Foot Locker CEO, I can get him. And the Foot Locker CEO said, you have 48 hours to deliver Grant Hill, saying whatever about Foot Locker, or the deal's off. And this was all the money like Itzler had to his name. He had nothing. So he had to make this happen. So he uses, the remaining funds that he has, flies down to Orlando. He knows Hill has a game there that day. He gets there at 10 in the morning. The players usually show up at like 5 p.m., so he's just hanging around the stadium, sneaks in, pretending like he works there or something, and then, finally sees Grant Hill in the evening before the game. He's like, Grant, I was talking to your agent all day, which is not true, and, it's part of your contract that you have to do this quick clip for Foot Locker, which is also not true. And so... after pretty much going to Hill and saying like, cutting the bullshit, and says, hey, look, I flew down here on my own dime. This goes all the way up to the CEO of Foot Locker. I'm going to lose my job if you don't just do this quick clip. So Hill does it reluctantly, quick little 30-second clip for him. Itzler flies back. They put it on the radio the next day. He saves the day. And 20 years later, this isn't featured in the book. I just found this, that Itzler and Hill co-own, or Hill has a major piece in owning the Atlanta Hawks with Itzler. And it just goes back to Itzler, like he just gets his foot in the door and figures it out later. He's done that so many times where, he'll call someone, say, yeah, I can do it, and then he figures it out. And like, that's such a powerful strategy to have, that he just has whatever it takes. Like if he can get his foot in the door, he'll figure out the rest later. And I think that's something that we could all deploy in certain aspects of our life. And so that was just a cool story that, Itzler just does things his own way, and he just gets the job done, and he's got a whatever it takes attitude. I love that. I love it. Maybe the last piece for you. It's getting towards the end of the month that they're together in December, and it's New Year's. And so I guess it is the end of the month, literally. And Itzler and his wife have a party every year for New Year for their friends, and everyone goes around stereotypically, what's your New Year's resolution? And people say, I want to start a business. I'm going to move to wine country. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And when the conversation turns to Goggins, everyone is really quiet and is on the edge of their seat. Like, what is this guy going to say? And his answer is simple. It says, I'm not looking for anything else. I'm going to do the same shit I've been doing, only better. And he just stops there. And I think it's a good place for this, this episode to end and just say, hey, it's great to have big goals and big ambitions. I certainly do. I'm sure that you do. If you're listening to this, you're on your way to being a 1%er. You're getting after it. But sometimes it's better to not overcomplicate things. And you're doing what you've been doing, but you just want to get a little bit better, 1% better every day. And that's all Goggins was trying to get after. He wasn't trying to make a gazillion dollars. He wasn't trying to have this massive company. He wasn't trying to get all this media attention for the crazy endurance races that he's been doing. He just wants to get better at what he's doing, a little bit better every day. And I think that's really powerful. It's something that I want to take and just say, let's not make this too complicated. Let's just be a little bit better at the podcast today. Let's be a little bit better of a salesperson today. Let's be a little more patient with my coworkers, with my significant other, with my friends, with my parents, whomever. A little bit better. And I think if we all just strive to be 1% better every single day, you don't take days off from that, but you don't try to boil the ocean either, just 1%, I think this world can be a lot better of a place. I think we could be a lot stronger, and that is how things work out in the long run. So that's the way I'm going to end this thing. I would pick up the book if I were you. It's great. It's funny. Goggins is, the way he talks is hilarious throughout the book. So I was laughing out loud at a few points. It's got some good workouts in it if you're interested in that type of stuff. Like he breaks down what the workouts look like, and the rep schemes and the sets, and he breaks down every single day if there's multiple workouts a day, all that stuff. Some good business advice from Itzler. Now if you can excuse me, I need to go cold call Jesse Itzler and convince him to be my best friend. So thanks so much for listening. Out.